This man has tens of thousands of dollars in guns and ammo and hiding places for guns and everything in his house. It's crazy. It's unbelievable. When I would go home to visit, it would be like, okay, there's a new gun case, and he would show me his new guns and ammo. And then the next time, oh, there's 2 gun cases now and more ammo. And it just grew and grew to where I'm not even sure how much he has, but it's quite a collection.
This is the Q Dropped podcast. Stories of relationships torn apart by QAnon. Since starting this podcast, I've now talked to close to 24 of you at great length. You have parents, spouses, siblings, and children who have gone down the QAnon rabbit hole. They've done and said unthinkable things, and each time I hear a new story, I think to myself how lucky I am that my parents just aren't that bad. They seem to be able to respect the boundaries I've put in place for the most part. I've asked that they stop talking to me about their conspiracy theories. I've told them I don't want to hear about them and they need to keep it to themselves. I have made very clear that if they talk about these theories to either of my kids, that it's a deal breaker and they won't see my kids again. At least, not alone. When I think about Jane from episode 9 of season 1 of the Q Dropped podcast and how her mom could just never seem to keep her theories to herself, I think about how fortunate I am that my parents don't do that. When I spoke to Sarah in episode 15 of season 1 and she told me her mom was the same way, I felt relieved I don't have to deal with that. It seems that almost every person I've interviewed has a Q in their lives that just can't seem to shut up about their theories, no matter what they're risking by continuing to push them. But my parents have, for the most part, respected the boundaries I laid out for them. Outside of a few mild comments here and there, they keep their wild theories to themselves. I'm thankful for that. It allows us to continue to have some kind of a relationship, and that means the world to me. Part of the reason, though, why I have asked them to keep their theories to themselves is because I'm an opinionated person, and I struggle to ignore things that go against the very core of my being. I find it hard to keep my mouth shut when someone says something asinine and unfounded in front of me, and I will argue it. Friends and family have often joked that I should have been a lawyer, and I can't say that I disagree. I like to argue. I like to change minds and sway opinions using facts, evidence, and logic. So whenever my parents have brought up their QAnon beliefs, I have met them head on and pushed back. I don't back down when someone is saying something dangerous or hateful, and if my parents continued to try to convince me of their theories, we would constantly be arguing. There is a big part of me that wonders what our relationship would look like if I hadn't set those boundaries with them or they didn't respect them. I've been afraid since the day I found out that they've been sucked down this rabbit hole that they would defend their beliefs by any means. I've been terrified that they're willing to be all-out cruel to protect their worldview, and that is a massive part of why I don't want to hear it. I don't want to find out how cruel they're willing to be to hang on to their delusions. Each of my interviewees has had a Q in their lives who has been downright cruel to them in some way or another, and it has broken my heart every time. Today's guest, unfortunately, is no different. Sarah's MAGA father has been a cruel, vindictive, and petty person to his daughter, who is here to tell the story.
I'm originally from Pennsylvania, but I have been in Wisconsin for about 12 years. And I do a lot of animal rescue here while working a full-time job at a medical technology company. And I've got a little farm with horses and chickens, so that kind of takes up a lot of my time. Stay home, take care of the animals.
From my vantage point, April seems to come from a very typical American family.
I had a good childhood, upper middle class. We went to church every so often, but my dad never went. And that's more so because he worked overnights a lot and weird hours. But my mom would take us to church, but it was more for, in my opinion, social reasons, not religious reasons. So
April had a great relationship with her mom growing up, but her connection with her dad had always been missing something.
he was a nuclear power plant operator, so he had a lot of responsibility. He made good money. My mom didn't work. We went on vacation all the time, but he was always more of a teacher than a dad. You know, we didn't have that loving father-daughter relationship that I feel like a lot of people that I know have. He was definitely a teacher, taught me responsibility, taught me how to change a tire and all those important life skills. And obviously I appreciate that from him, but that's why it's been so hard to navigate these times, because I never had that really emotional relationship with him. Now that I'm an adult, I see other people with their fathers, and I am kind of sad for what I didn't have.
Other than that, however, April's childhood was normal, rich with fun family experiences and traditions. It was only when she graduated high school that her life took a turn that wasn't quite as common for girls her age.
I joined the Marines right out of high school. I left 2 days after I graduated high school, and I've never been home again, never living at home again. So I've always been away from my family living in Pennsylvania. I've lived in Germany. I've lived in Wisconsin. I lived in North Carolina, South Carolina. So a lot of what's come into play with my relationship with my dad has been a lot over social media. And he finds social media dumb, even though he's still on social media. But you know, it's a way to keep up with my life. I do a lot of dog rescue. I post a lot about my life on social media, and it's a way to keep up with me.
April would serve in the Marines for 4 years, and her experiences would shift her political worldview drastically.
So I grew up Republican. You know, I was probably the only Marine in my shop that was like George W. Bush, because I was in between like 2002 and 2006. And so everyone else actually was like a Democrat, and I was the only one and they used to make fun of me. I can remember it. And I just grew up Republican. That's what my parents were. That's what I knew. And then once I was in the Marines, meeting new people, getting out of my small town Pennsylvania, community, and meeting new people, going to new places, moving overseas, that's when I started to realize, like, this doesn't fit in with what I believe in. And when Obama, ran for president, I really liked him. And that's when I really started to look deeply at my beliefs. Like, no, actually, I think I'm more Democrat than I am Republican. And I switched, my voter registration and everything. And during the election with Trump and Hillary, I was devastated that Trump won. But both of my parents are divorced, but they were both Trump supporters.
Both of April's parents were right-wing supporters of the Republican Party, but her father seemed to take it a bit more seriously than her mom.
He is uber patriotic. He never served in the military or anything, but you would think he was the general of the Navy or something. I mean, he is so patriotic. He's one of these guys that wears the Constitution t-shirt and, you name it. American flag hat, big time, hates the NFL now because players were kneeling for the flag. That is him wrapped up in a bow. And that's what he drives his patriotism. That's his reason for every belief that he has, I guess. It's that everything is unpatriotic if you don't think this way.
Despite her father's extreme patriotism, she had a decent relationship with her parents.
I actually got along fine with my parents through the whole Trump presidency. We just didn't talk politics, and relationship was fine. We get into our argument here or there, but overall, we all agreed to not talk about it and move on. The election between Trump and Biden is where everything went to hell in a handbasket, I think.
That's when April's father began to take his political beliefs to the next level, and she began to see a new side of her father she didn't like.
Anything that a Democrat says is wrong, and anything that a Republican says is right. I mean, definitely, he grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. His parents were very racist. My whole family, I'm sure, that lived in that area, Tennessee, Mississippi, very racist. He will claim otherwise, that he's not, but I know that he is. Very all lives matter type of person. Anything that Joe Biden does when it comes to Russia or anything, he's got a big story about how he's doing it wrong. And immigration is a big one. Every time I call him, which is why I don't call him anymore, among other reasons, is that every time I would call him, he would bring up the fact that they bust a bunch of migrants into the town where I'm from in Pennsylvania, and just would rant about that. And I would just have to say, okay, oh, that's crazy. All right. Every time, to try to not be in an argument about it. But the migrants being bussed outside of Kamala Harris's home, he's two thumbs up, right?
On Christmas Eve 2022, 2 busloads of migrants arrived outside of Vice President Kamala Harris's home. They were people who had been shipped up from Texas to Washington, D.C., and judging from the fact that they were in t-shirts and light clothing, they'd been entirely unprepared for their frigid destination. These migrants, of course, had had no intention of traveling to the home of the vice president. Instead, these human beings had been used as props to help officials in southern states prove a point about the migrant crisis at the southern border. It is understood that the far-right governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, had organized this stunt to make a political statement. He used human beings who had already felt they had no other choice but to flee their home countries, including Ecuador, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Peru, and Colombia, in search of something better in the U.S. Governor Abbott clearly didn't see these people as humans in dire need of assistance, but rather an opportunity to try and embarrass a political rival. Needless to say, April was horrified to hear that her dad thought this was a good thing.
And actually, if you remember the 2 white older people that had the guns that became famous, the lady with the gun, like protecting their home, that is my dad and his girlfriend. If you need a picture or a vision of them with their guns, I mean, he constantly is saying, if anyone tries to come take my guns, I'm going to be killed. Actually, he's stockpiled. We had 1 gun in my house growing up, a shotgun for protection, my whole childhood. This man has tens of thousands of dollars in guns and ammo and hiding places for guns and everything in his house. It's crazy. It's unbelievable. When I would go home to visit, it would be like, okay, there's a new gun case, and he would show me his new guns and ammo. And then the next time, oh, there's 2 gun cases now and more ammo. And it just grew and grew to where I'm not even sure how much he has, but it's quite a collection.
April tried to keep the peace and maintain a relationship with her father by avoiding talk of politics and trying to focus on the things the two of them did have in common. But when she made the mistake of replying to a post on Facebook, everything just unraveled.
So my dad posted something on social media that wasn't true, and I commented on it and said, that's not true, and didn't think anything of it. But then I noticed after a couple of weeks that he wasn't liking any of my posts. I post a lot of pictures of the dogs I rescue and my farm and things like that. So he didn't like my posts anymore. So I asked my sister, hey, did Dad cancel his Facebook? What happened? She's like, no, I see him still. I'm like, oh, I can't see him. So I had my sister call my dad and ask what happened. And he told her, well, she embarrassed me in front of my friends, so I blocked her on Facebook. And I obviously came out of left field because, like I mentioned before, that's the way he could keep up to date with me because I live in a different state. And I post a lot of my life on there. So that was like the first big thing that happened where I thought to myself, holy cow, this is serious that he's blocking his own daughter because of one comment that I posted. And that was the start of the end of our relationship. It really hurt because it's like, you don't want to see what I'm doing. I mean, that's the way you get to see what I'm doing. I can't call you every day and update you on my life or even every week, right? So not being home, and he has this expectation of, he's a very old school guy. He called his parents every week until they died. And he expects that of me. And if I don't do that, then I'm not a good child. And even though for years and years, we would call each other, and he still calls my sister. She calls him sometimes, he calls her sometimes. But now that I'm in this black sheep era, he will not call me. I have to call him. And if I don't, then I'm not a good daughter. So, but I feel like I have no reason to call him anymore because what's the point of talking about the weather or whatever BS? To me, that's not a meaningful relationship. I don't want to waste my time with that. But then I feel guilty also. Like, am I being a jerk of a daughter? But so it's an internal struggle always to know, am I being the stubborn one? Am I being the jerk, or is he? But I always come back to the fact that no, I am not the jerk. He is.
Although this just happened on social media, and it's widely accepted that we shouldn't care about what happens on social media, these platforms have a profound impact on our lives. To not care about what goes on within the realm of social media is to deny the reality of our world today. Social media has led to social change, it has driven progress, and steered the course of elections. Social media has helped us to learn more about each other, and it has also led some of us to violence. Social media is as important and relevant to what's happening in the world as debates between political candidates, rallies, and even classrooms. In the developed world, this is how we stay connected. It's how we stay in touch. And it's a significant part of how our relationships are maintained. It shapes everything we experience, and to deny that is to be willfully ignorant. So when April's dad blocked her on social media, she had every right to feel heartbreak. This wasn't just some random troll calling her a libtard. This act was not without meaning. This was her father, and no father blocks his daughter on Facebook unless he's trying to send a message, and that message was wrapped in cruelty. April seems like a very smart person. She understood that this act was her father telling her to step in line and share his political worldview or get cut off. Anyone with a heart would have been upset, and April was. Sadly, the abject cruelty did not stop there.
So I had posted on Facebook, maybe this was a few months later after he blocked me. I was still friends with his girlfriend. And we had gotten in a little debate about all lives matter versus Black Lives Matter, but I didn't want to argue with her. So I was like, hey, I'm not going to argue with you. Fast forward a couple months later, I had posted something about a TV show plot where the main character was mad she couldn't have kids. And I was joking around, that's such a stupid plot. There's no way she'd want kids. She's like me, where I don't want kids. And I just joked about not liking kids, which is stupid. Everybody knows that I don't want kids. So fast forward a few months later, in the news, a little boy was shot by his neighbor, his Black neighbor in North Carolina. I don't know if you remember that horrific happening, but she texted me a link to the news article of that incident and said, all lives matter in all caps. And then, but you hate kids anyway, is what she texted me. And I took that as she's implying that I am okay with this Black man killing this child. And I couldn't believe it.
I'm a proud and happy mom. I love my kids more than anything, and I cannot imagine my life without them. But I know there are many people out there who don't want kids, and that's okay. Having children is a huge responsibility. It's expensive, and it can be exhausting every bit as much as it can be rewarding. People like April don't make the decision not to have kids lightly. It's not as if they're just being callous and cold. They have other desires, other paths they want to take, and things they want to do that would take up all the time they would have had to spend with their kids. April has devoted her life to animal rescue. She volunteered to serve in the Marines. She's dedicated to her partner and her animals and her career. None of that means she hates kids. None of that means she doesn't understand the value in the life of a child. None of that means that April can't understand what incredible grief the loss of a child might cause. Make no mistake, what her father's girlfriend texted her that day was heartless. April was devastated.
I was so upset, and I hadn't talked to my dad in months at this point. I called him crying, asking why his girlfriend is sending me this and that it really upset me. And he just unemotional, like, you have to take that up with her. She's the one who texted it to you. And basically that was the end of the conversation. She never apologized. I was just dumbfounded because I really truly think that's what she felt, was that I was okay with that happening, which is just absolutely ridiculous. So then I didn't talk to her for a while, or my dad, because then it was just weird in general, right? Why would I call and be talking about the weather when all of this underlying stuff is happening?
Things only got worse after that.
My dad, when I say he's old school, right, he wants me to call him and blah, blah. He's also big on gifts. So you better give somebody a gift on their birthday. You better give somebody a gift on Christmas. And if it's not a good enough gift, then you didn't put it forth enough effort. And he's big into like cards and written correspondence, things like that. So I had sent him that Christmas a gift basket from Wisconsin, like bacon and some Wisconsin cheese and things. And his birthday is very close to Christmas. So I just sent that, and that was it, because I wanted to send something because I knew that's important to him, but I wasn't going to go spend $200 on crap. So I sent that to him, and, nothing, no response. And my birthday comes few months later, and I don't get a birthday card from my dad, which he every single year sends a birthday card with money throughout my entire, adulthood. And I was like, geez, that's weird. I asked my sister a couple months later, did you get a birthday card from Dad? She said, yeah, the normal birthday card with money. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting, because I didn't get a birthday card. So I called him, but he's like, well, you just sent me 2 pounds of bacon for my birthday and Christmas. That's not adequate, basically. And I just couldn't believe it, because I don't exchange gifts with my mom, my sister, or anything. I only do it with him because it's important as a daughter. But like, my gift wasn't good enough. So at that point, I'm like, screw this. I'm just not ever sending him anything ever again. But so then Father's Day comes up, and I didn't feel like calling him, because why would I? So I texted him Happy Father's Day, and he didn't respond to me. And I'm like, okay, now it's full-fledged I hate my daughter type of thing. So I emailed him, and I wrote all my feelings in an email. And this is why I didn't call you. This is how I'm feeling. I'm upset about your girlfriend texting me this, and I'm upset that you blocked me on Facebook and blah, blah, blah. And he just wrote me back, call me. So I called him back, and basically we spent an hour on the phone. This was our last real phone conversation, I guess. And this was a year and a half ago, where he basically didn't apologize for anything, just said that I embarrassed him in front of his friends, and Facebook isn't important, and I'm being dramatic, and that was the end of it. So nothing was resolved during that conversation.
You might expect that at this point, April and her father just remained distant, and that life would go on as it had before. Maybe they see each other on holidays and it's tense, but they power through until it's over. Maybe it just becomes a distant, cold relationship like so many of the other guests we interviewed on this podcast. But April's dad wasn't done making his point. He wasn't done with being cruel and proving to her that if she dared feel differently about politics, she was going to suffer.
Later that year, a family member died of COVID, so I went home to Pennsylvania for the funeral. And every time we go home, my dad is he's always planning ahead for his death. Like, he's very, I think that's a boomer thing, maybe, make sure his will is in place and all this stuff. So every time he always gives us a status of his finances and where everything is if he dies and all this stuff. So my sister and I are home, and he gives us his update and says that he's like, my sister is the executor, and if she can't do it, it's his girlfriend. And then then he lists out all the things his girlfriend gets, and then all the things my sister gets. And then finally that my sister and I split, his money 50-50 or something. And I'm like, okay, well, that's weird that I was taken out of the executor role, but whatever, no big deal. So that was like September of 2021. Then a couple months later, my sister had gone back home, and my dad had a new will drafted up that my sister had to sign. And it was taking my share from 50-50 to like 70-30 or something. And my sister was like, what? Why are you doing that? And he's like, well, because her beliefs don't align with mine. And anybody who doesn't have my same beliefs is going to be cut out of my life. I've already cut out all these friends, and, unless she changes, I'm going to just keep doing this. And so my sister was like, she didn't know what to do, but I mean, she signed it and she told me about it. Thank goodness, because I would have had no idea really. And now the latest I've heard is that it's 80-20, but I'm pretty much guaranteeing after the fact that I haven't talked to him, over the holidays, and I haven't called him in a year, that I'm probably written out completely, if I had to make a good educated guess.
April had been almost completely cut out of the will because, let me just check my notes, she fact-checked something her father said on Facebook. The platform that he himself said, quote unquote, isn't important. He wrote his flesh and blood out of his will because she disagreed with one single post on Facebook. And then he had the nerve to call her dramatic. I'm almost embarrassed for her father that he would point to her and say she was the one being dramatic. This man is hoarding guns for the end of the world. He's blocking his daughter on Facebook for differing opinions. He's using phrases like embarrassed me in front of my friends. And he has repeatedly paid a lawyer to cut his daughter further and further out of his will to make a point. This man is more drama than a telenovela. He is literally saying he's going to take his toys and go home because April sees things differently. He's throwing an emotional tantrum and tossing away an important relationship because he got fact-checked. Fact-checked on Facebook, which he himself says is not important. You simply can't make this stuff up. But for April, sadly, this was the reality she was living.
That's the killer, is like just something so minuscule. It was such an impact to him. I feel like I'm probably never going to talk to him again, to be honest, unless he came to me and apologized or something. I just have no desire. And I've listened to a few of your podcasts where people, put up with their parents or friends who or siblings who are like this. And then I question myself, am I a bad person? Am I being too stubborn? Should I reach out? But I just can't bring myself to do it.
April feels it's futile to argue with her dad.
My dad is extremely smart, which I think makes me more upset that he's falling for a lot of this. It's hard with intelligent people because they always have a good answer for everything, even if they're wrong. So I'm not a very good arguer with my dad because he is a very smart man. And, I could study all day to try to debate him, but I probably would have a hard time. So I think the craziest thing about all of this is that there are some really smart people. I have very smart friends also that are very right-wing, just crazy, election was stolen, won't believe that it wasn't. And it's really scary that such intelligent people can be manipulated, however they're being manipulated. I don't know.
April thinks the internet played a big role in radicalizing her father.
I think maybe the pushback from people in his life on things that he was sharing on social media and being told he wasn't right about something because he's so used to being right just in life and in his job, that being told he was wrong was just not an answer. I think obviously social media is the biggest proponent. Like, I think younger people have the ability to see if things are photoshopped and research on the internet if something's true or not, where the boomer generation they see something and they think it's real, because I think that's how they grew up, right? You have the newspaper and you have the TV, and now you have this new the internet and news there. So if you read it, it must be true. And there's such a fine line between what's true and false anymore. But I find it funny, the mainstream media, they're all, you can't watch the mainstream media, but there's been propaganda and false news from like the 1800s. I mean, if you read newspapers from the 1800s, these editors would make up all sorts of stuff. And it's been throughout history, and we do have to research and make decisions for ourselves. But I feel like there's a lot of information out there that is good, and it's blatant that like Fox News and Newsmax are skewed, and you can read a lot of scholarly articles and good sources that validate that, but you just can't get it through anyone else. It's really sad.
April doesn't think much will change unless we begin to approach information differently.
I am privileged enough to be able to move, right? We're too educated, we have jobs, good jobs, and we could afford to move out of this state. But a lot of people cannot just afford to pick up and move out of a state into another state because you don't believe in the politics. That's why federal politics is so important. I agree that states should have certain power, but a low-income person with a really shitty house in East St. Louis is not going to be able to move, and go to a better state that more aligns with their beliefs. Like, it's just ludicrous to think that most people could do that because they can't. And it's just really sad.
April doesn't believe that different politics should be enough to end a relationship.
My mom, even though she has similar beliefs to my dad, we have a relationship. We've agreed to disagree on politics, and I don't bring it up. My mom sometimes brings it up, and we'll have an argument here or there, but we always resolve it. We always end up talking again. And it's not worth losing a relationship over. My dad should understand, and see that my mom and I still have a relationship, even though we have differing beliefs, and we're fine. So why can't we have that same thing with me and my dad? That's where I have the most heartache as well, because it's not like one parent is one way and another parent is another way. They're both the same, yet my mom is treating me still like a human being, and my dad is not. And now I have no relationship with him, and I almost feel guilty for not grieving that relationship, I guess. It's weird.
If he apologized, like tomorrow, if he called you and apologized, would you accept his apology and try to form a relationship with him again?
I think I would, because I know that that's never going to happen, because he's an emotionless box. But no, I totally would. If he called me and said, "I'm sorry for blocking you on Facebook, and I'm sorry for not calling you and whatever," I would totally accept that, because for him to apologize would take a huge amount of, what's the word? Being humble. And he is not that. So it would shock me beyond my wildest imagination if he ever apologized to me. I don't think he thinks I deserve an apology, or that he's done anything wrong for me to deserve an apology. The thing that's most annoying too is that if I called him right now, I could call him right now while I'm talking to you. He would answer the phone and he would talk to me about the weather. But I don't want that. I don't know. I just don't think it's meaningful. I don't want him to think that, like, if I called him right now, I don't want him to think I'm calling him because I want to be back in the will or something like that, because that's totally not the case. if I wanted to call him, it'd be because I wanted to talk to my father and have a relationship with him. And I already told him in my email, the very bottom of the email that I wrote to him said, I want a relationship with you. I don't want to fight and not talk. And I've written that out in words to him, and I told him that on the phone, but none of that matters. And when you have no emotion, and even my mom was married to him for 40 years. She said she can't believe he's taken me out of his will, but she's also not surprised by it. She says, I was married to that man for 40 years, and I know that he has no emotional space in his head. She's like, why do you think I left? So it's just who he is. And I have to accept that, I think, and move on with my life, which I've done. And it's just sad because my mother-in-law had a brain aneurysm, and it was a very traumatic time. And I know how fast health can decline and bad things can happen. And I always try to think, what if my dad has a stroke today? Or, what am I going to do if something like that happens to him? Right. And it's hard to know what I would do. I actually went back to Pennsylvania recently to visit my mom and uncle, and I didn't tell my dad I was there. And that was the first time I've ever gone back and not seen him. And to me, it was a very kind of like a big step in my journey of dealing with this relationship loss and everything. Of course, my mom ruined it by texting him saying, oh, she's here visiting. I was like, what are you doing, mother? I was pretty upset with her about that, because then it makes me look like a real jerk that I traveled all the way to Pennsylvania and not seen him. So that's where I feel like now I'm really, really off now I'm the full black sheep. But I can't just avoid going home the rest of my life because I don't have a relationship with him when all of my family's there. So his girlfriend actually mailed a Christmas card this past year with like Christmas ornaments in it. And she wrote, we've been thinking about you throughout the year, love, Dad, and blah, blah. And I'm like, really? To me, it's just the most backhanded. And other people I've talked to are like, well, the ball's in your court now, like my court. And I'm like, how is that sending a card that is total BS? My dad didn't write it. I know he probably didn't even know that she signed his name in that card. I didn't even know how to respond. And I did not thank her or anything. And of course, then I feel like a jerk. And I've had family members say, well, the ball's in your court now. You can do this or that. It's like, I don't feel like that was a ball thrown to me.
Surprisingly, April's father has veered away from his support for Trump.
Now he's on the Ron DeSantis train. If I had to guess, actually, I have not spoken to my dad since January of last year. So I don't fully know his story anymore. But if I had to guess, I mean, he is a smart guy. And I think he knows that the probability of Trump winning would be not high. So I think he likes Ron.
April sees herself as a patriotic person and struggles to understand how her father can't see that.
I totally am patriotic. Like I served in the Marines. I love this country. But I think it's unfair to a lot of people in this country. And because I believe that those people should be supported. I'm unpatriotic. I don't know.
Despite the loss of her relationship with her dad, April is not alone.
My husband, my sister, and my mom all are very supportive in each of their own ways. I'm extremely grateful for my husband that has very similar beliefs as me and is always supporting me and understands that my dad is being a jerk. And my sister is, she's in the hardest place, I think, because she's in the middle of, she's trying to maintain a relationship with my dad. The funny thing is she has very similar beliefs as me. She's just much quieter about it. And so she's in a hard place, but she's very supportive as well. And I've talked to some therapists, and I think I'm in a good place. I still have a lot of guilt, and I don't think that'll ever go away.
Still, she feels pressure from some people in her life to reconnect with her father.
You only have one dad. I have people say that, but it's like, if it's not meaningful, I have an uncle that I'm closer to than my dad. I don't need my dad. And I feel terrible about that. But if I'm going to be treated like a second-rate family member because I'm a Democrat or whatever, it doesn't feel right. I'm not going to beg for affection from someone who doesn't want to provide it.
I asked April if she had any advice for those of us with Qs or MAGAs in our family.
I think my only advice is, well, first to, consult a therapist or something if you need to, but otherwise, we have to be okay with that loss, and hopefully other people that are experiencing it have someone or have another family member to lean on, just like I lean on my uncle. I don't think just because my dad donated his sperm to have me means that I have to have a relationship with him, especially if we're so different in our views on, the world and life in general. I don't know. But again, I'm still internally struggling, so I don't know if I have the greatest advice for anybody. It's only been, a year, just over a year of no talking. My uncle didn't talk to his father, my grandfather, for 4 years. My grandfather was actually a conspiracy theorist back in the, Reagan days, I guess. I don't know. But my uncle says that he didn't talk to his dad for 4 years, and they finally started talking again. So that gives me a little hope that, someday when this is all past, that we could, amend things. But the way things are going today with the radicalization of everything, I don't see a good ending to any of this personally. I do think it's reasonable to choose not to associate yourself with someone with differing beliefs, because a lot of the beliefs are so deep into our, culture and things. And if somebody is racist or, transphobic or something, and those are core beliefs of just humankind, like I don't think it's a problem to disassociate yourself with people like that. I also think having a bigger worldview and like leaving the place that you're from and experiencing different areas of the country and even internationally is a big deal, because a lot of the people that I know that are very right wing have lived in one place and have never moved out. Maybe if they've gone on some vacations, but they don't know, anything. Like my dad probably doesn't even know a Black person in real life, and I'm not exaggerating. It's very small-minded, or like people who just don't leave their areas and they don't know what's out there. And until something happens to you, I think a lot of anti-abortion people, are super anti-abortion until their daughter gets pregnant on accident and, is 15 or something. And
moving forward, April has some healing to do.
I think what bothers me too, it's funny, what song always makes me cry is if you've seen Encanto I'm sure maybe with your kids, the song All of You. Every time I hear that stupid song, I cry. And I think it's because I am so much more than my politics. I'm not even that big of a big into politics in general. I have certain beliefs, I vote a certain way, but I'm not, protesting and posting all sorts of political stuff on social media. I don't do any of that. And, I rescue a ton of animals. I have a good job. I'm a good person. And it's sad that my dad only sees this small part of me that's not even a big deal. And I think that's what hurts the most. Maybe in a few years when Trump and Biden are dead, my dad and I can talk again. I don't know. I don't know what the future holds, but I think I have to establish my boundaries for what I'm capable of handling emotionally. And if that means I don't have a father in my life, then I just have to be okay with that. So I guess my sister gets all the guns.
Thank you so much to April for sitting down to speak with me. I hope going forward you can find some healing and that you have a long and happy life with your partner and your animals. You can catch a few bonus clips from my interview with April on our Patreon. The link is in the show notes. And stay tuned for a whole new episode next week. Thanks for listening.